without a minyan. I gathered together 7 Jewish people that we found, and I had a minyan. I was staying in the only hotel that was livable, or I don't know how to say it even, which was right in the center of the city. And after Yom Kippur, I went out to find an apartment, and I was going from agency to agency trying to find an apartment. A week went by. It's in the middle of Sukkot, and I still haven't found an apartment. And on Chol Hamoed Sukkot, I was walking through the square of the city, coming back after a long day of apartment searching, and I'm thinking that I can't find an apartment. Now let me give you a little bit of a background why it was so difficult to find an apartment to live. When I started looking for apartments, I knew pretty much where I wanted to be, because the center of the city is where the old shul, the old synagogue was, and I was looking pretty much around that area. I should be able to walk there on Shabbos. And I was looking for a larger size apartment or home, because we already had a few children and we wanted to be able to invite people to our house. And this was a very difficult thing to find. Most of the apartments within the center of the city were much smaller, not what we were looking for. After a few days of looking, I pretty much got an idea of the map of the city. I opened up one of the listings that they had at an agency that I was working with, and I actually found a nice large apartment in the center of the city, pretty much what I'm looking for. So I asked the agent, I said, why don't we go look at this apartment? And she said, this apartment is bezudobstva. I don't know if anyone here speaks Russian. This apartment is bezudobstva. In Russian, udobstva means comfort. So in my limited amount of Russian and my limited imagination of what apartments should look like, I figured, okay, so comfort would mean with, furnished apartment or something. And I said, okay, so it's an unfurnished apartment. That's fine. I'm not looking for a furnished apartment necessarily. Why don't we go see it? So she says, no, you don't understand. This is without this is no udobstva. I said, okay, fine, but that's, big deal. I didn't come to Sumy Ukraine to have a sauna or a swimming pool in my backyard. I could have stayed in California for that. Okay, so this woman says, fine, you know what? Let's go see it. So we go to this apartment. It was perfect, exactly what I'm looking for. Perfect. And I'm walking around and I say, this is great. Then I realized that there's no restroom. There's no sink in the kitchen. So I said, where? She says, I tried to explain to you that these apartments in this listing are without udobstva. They don't have comfort. I said that this is not comfort. This is a necessity. Now, during COVID-19, everybody became very educated in what's considered necessities and what's considered luxuries. And this was my initiation into Sumy Ukraine, to realize what is a necessity and what is what's considered comfort and luxury. Living in the center of the city, about 80% of the residents don't have a running water in their home. So she said, actually, this apartment is not what I described. It actually does have a pump in the yard where you can pump water. And so it's a little bit more upgraded. I said, yes, thank you very much. And so it was difficult to find an apartment. And after a week or so of searching, in the middle of Sukkot, I was started to feel the pressure, and I started to feel a little bit overwhelmed by what was going on. And I was thinking, I don't know why did I come to this far-flung corner? I didn't have a minyan for Yom Kippur, and I can't find a decent place to live. And this is getting a little bit too much. Maybe I overstepped my bounds. Maybe this is not for me. I was walking through the square back to my hotel. It was getting dark. The square in Sumy was built by it's surrounded by administrative buildings, like city hall kind of style. And they were built actually by the NKVD, by the KGB, because Sumy is a city off to the side. It's off the beaten track. We don't get a lot of visitors. We don't have an airport, as Rabbi Deitch explained. Actually, we shouldn't say that. There is an airport, it just doesn't work. This was headquarters for the KGB for three very large counties surrounding the Kharkov, Chernigov, Poltava counties. And this is one of the reasons why Sumy is not a very Jewish town, because all the Jews that lived here practically were KGB, NKVD agents, and that's a whole other discussion, which maybe we'll have time for later, maybe we won't. Sumy, it's off to the side. It's just not on the beaten track. And the KGB built their administrative buildings around a huge square. When you walk through the square, you actually feel very intimidated. It was done specially that way, and it works. I can tell you, witness, it does work, especially when it's getting dark and it's a little chilly and rainy, and it's Sukkot. We can get snow sometimes. It wasn't snowing that time, but it was getting cold, and I'm walking through the square feeling really great about myself and about the decision that I made to schlep my family from California to this wonderful place. And pretty much deserted this square, and there's a man walking towards me, and from pretty far away, I noticed that he's walking and he's staring right at me, which is normal. I know I don't look exactly like everybody else on the street, and people do look at me, but usually when you look back at someone who's looking at you, they'll look the other way, or at least try to make like they're not looking at you. And this man didn't have any intention of giving me the impression that he's not looking at me, and he's just staring me down, and we're getting closer and closer towards each other. And I started getting a little nervous. I figured best defense is an offense. And as we come within range, I say, Dobry večer, good evening. And he smiles and he says, good evening. Are you Chabad Lubavitch? That wasn't the question that I was expecting from him. I was totally taken aback, and I said, yes, I'm Chabad Lubavitch. And what about you? He says, I'm Chabad Lubavitch. Now, he did not look like he was Chabad Lubavitch. I think I did look like I was, but he did not look like he was. I said, you're Chabad Lubavitch? Oh, very interesting. Who's Jewish in your family? Your grandmother, your grandfather? That's usually how I start, because parents are a little too close. Usually people go by their grandparents or great-grandparents even. So he says, oh, no, my parents, my grandparents, nobody's Jewish in my family. I said, no one's Jewish in your family, but you're Chabad Lubavitch. How does that work? So he says, I'm Chabad Lubavitch. I work for the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So I said, oh, you work for the Levitansky Rebbe. This is getting even more interesting. But in Ukraine or in Russia, people call their rabbis Rebbe. That's the way people address Rebbe. So he's saying he works for the Levitansky Rebbe could mean that he works for any one of the other Chabad emissaries in one of the other cities. So I automatically say, oh, you work for the Levitansky Rebbe, which Rebbe? Do you work for Rabbi Moskowitz in Kharkov or Rabbi Kamenetsky in the Dnepropetrovsk? And I start listing off rabbis, and he stops me and he says, no. I work for Rabbi Schneerson, Lubavitcher Rebbe. So I said, one second. I'm not even here a week. There's already competition in town. You work for the Lubavitcher Rebbe. You're not Jewish. You got to tell me, how does this work? So he says, I'll tell you, a few years ago, I got a little bit of money, and I decided to try my luck to move to the United States. So I flew to America, and after a few weeks, a month, I ran out of money, and I needed a job. So I looked around, and I ended up getting a job at the Oyhel, at the resting place of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And I worked there for 3 years. I was the janitor at the Oyhel of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And I tried to get my papers done and all different things. It wasn't working. Eventually, I finally got my green card. And I decided to come back to Sumy to invest, to start a business. I don't remember exactly what. Anyway, he says, so I know everyone. I know Rabbi Shemtov, Rabbi Refsin, Rabbi Kotlarsky, Rabbi Krinsky, and he starts naming off all the rabbis. I thought he was, this was, he was making up this story. It didn't make any sense. It was impossible. In Sumy, Ukraine, I'm meeting somebody who was working in the oil of the Rebbe, and he's telling me I'm Chabad Lubavitch, the whole thing. I took his name and number, and we parted. And I went back to my hotel, and I started thinking to myself, what just happened? I'm the emissary of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the shliach of the Rebbe, coming to a place here, and I'm thinking to myself, maybe I'm not doing the right thing. And at that moment, this man comes out of nowhere, literally out of nowhere, and he tells me, I worked for the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He's not Jewish. He was a janitor for 3 years, cleaning the floors by the oil, and he's proud to say that I worked for the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I said, if a non-Jewish person who's a janitor in the oil can be proud to work for the Lubavitcher Rebbe, how can I feel anything? Of course, I'm doing the right thing. I immediately changed my whole approach. The next day, I actually found an apartment with comfort, I should add, which was our first apartment when we moved in. And it was our first Yom Tov, Simchas Torah, when we came. And ever since then, people ask me, how do you keep sane? How do you stay sane in such a place? And many times I tell them, this is one thing that I try to remind myself, that this was something that I felt was literally the Rebbe sending me a message and telling me, don't worry, I know you're there. I'm watching over you. It's okay. Don't worry. I'm with you. And the main reason why I feel till this day that this was a direct message from the Rebbe is because after this happened, I actually contacted Rabbi Refsin at the oil, and I asked him, and he said, yes, it's true. I know this guy. He told me the guy's name. I tried contacting this person afterwards, and till today, I've never seen him again, never contacted him again. He just disappeared off the face of the earth. the Rebbe's impact on every person, on every small detail, was something that we always knew, and here and there we see little things. It comes out in the open, and we see it. Obviously, we'd like to see it a lot more, and many times it's not easy, especially during these times. Actually, I must say that the COVID and going on Zoom and all of these things for shluchim like myself has actually been wonderful. It's been great, at least this part of it, because we never got to see our friends and family and verbring and be together with people. One of the most difficult things in a place like this is feeling that you are isolated from the world. When we first came out here, making a phone call to the United States actually had to be ordered through the operator. I couldn't even make a direct call out of the outside. Internet didn't exist, period. We finally got dial-up, and our kids were able to log on to the online school, which was then by phone, and get disconnected every few minutes. So one of the blessings, I should say, of COVID-19 was that we were able to get together with Jews all over the world and friends all over the world, and this is something which gave us and this continues to give us a lot of strength. I'm privileged, happy to be here together with you guys in Arizona tonight. For you tonight, for me it's already today. L'chaim, l'chaim. I'm gonna open to questions because I don't know what people want to hear, and it's easier for me to just answer questions, and I don't know how much time I really have. Rabbi Mendy, Rabbi Deitch.
Well, thank you very much. You have as much time as you need. L'chaim. So first of all, how many years are you in Sumy already?
We are here now almost 16 years.
Wow.
Baruch Hashem. We now actually have a preschool, a mikveh, a shul, and we have a minyan up until we shut down. We did have a minyan every day for the past 5 years about. We actually have a program called Kolel Torah, which energized our community. We have about 20 men that come every morning to study for an hour, to daven and study for an hour, and about a group of about 30 women that come twice a week for classes. And this generally, the past 5 years has really energized our community. It has come out of the woodwork.
That's amazing. Someone asks, how did your wife react to the luxury apartment?
When we did find the luxury apartment, it was so luxurious that there was a carpet in the kitchen, and there was nothing else. It was just, there was a carpet and a light bulb in the kitchen, and there was a sink in the corner. That was the whole kitchen. And when I brought my wife into this apartment, and she was looking around, and she said, "Which room is the kitchen?" So I said, "Well, this room is the kitchen." So she says, "How do you know it's the kitchen?" I said, "Because there's a sink in the corner." That was literally it, yeah. My wife is actually from Johannesburg, South Africa, and grew up, I know Mendy says I grew up in California, but I did grow up on Shlichus. I didn't grow up with many, I should say, even small luxuries. For Sumy Ukraine. My wife did actually in Johannesburg, South Africa, and yeah, definitely much more difficult for her. But we got over it. It's the small things.
How did you get kosher food?
Kosher food is one of the challenges in places like this. We joke that peanut butter and jelly sandwich in America is the quick way of sending your kids off to school. If we want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, we make the bread, we make the peanut butter, and we make the jelly. So there's a lot of effort that goes into that. But once you do that all by yourself, it tastes a lot better. In the beginning, we didn't have meat or things like that. We just made do with what we have. Till today, we actually go to milk the cows so that we can have kosher milk, and we make butter and ice cream and all different things with that. Meat and chicken and other things come from the larger cities, which today, Baruch Hashem, have also become much more available, and there are larger Jewish communities in the larger cities, although they're far from us, but there is transportation, and we get from there. So slowly but surely.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow. That is definitely, when we first moved to Arizona, we thought we had it hard because it was hard to get milk and we had to make our own bread. But now, thankfully, there's supermarkets and things like that. But to make cheese and stuff, wow, that's unbelievable. To do without, it's incredible. Somebody wants to know how big the overall congregation is and how do you go about growing it? I know I follow you on Facebook, and everyone's welcome to follow me on Facebook also. Chabad Sumy. And I mean, I see your Purim party has several hundred people, so I'm curious to know also how big is the congregation? How do you go about growing it?
Okay, as I mentioned, Sumy Ukraine was not a very Jewish city. It never was. Actually, I met one of the Hasidim who was during the communist times. He was in Chernigov, which was much more a Jewish Hasidish city, and he was part of the underground during the communist era. He spent a lot of time in some of the smaller cities around Sumy, some that Rabbi Deitch might notice, from Kralevets and Kralevitz, Romney, and Kanatop. So I asked him, actually, I wanted to know if he can give me any history of Sumy. And I said, I moved to Sumy and I want to know any history from Sumy. And he says, Shah. I said, Shah what? He says, Mizok nicht dem Wort. Don't mention that name. He said, what name? He says, that name of that city. We don't mention that name. So I said, why not? Well, what's the problem? So he says, just the name of the city inflicts fear. He says that it was like you wouldn't even say the word Sumy because they were so petrified to get anywhere close to this city. So many of the Jews that live here today are grandchildren, great-grandchildren of communist people who worked in the KGB. Some of them are very proud of it till today. Some of them are not. And it really depends. But one of the bigger problems is that many of these people didn't even tell their children that they were Jewish. And that's really a very large part of what we do here is we dig through the archives. One of the things that the communists did that we can commend them for is they were very organized, and they actually wrote Jewish. They didn't do it for the right reasons, but if somebody was Jewish, they made sure to write somewhere that he was Jewish. And people dig through the archives and they find birth certificates or marriage certificates or work permits and things like that to establish that their great-grandmother was Jewish. I have found in our city 3 priests who are Jewish, and that's a whole story in itself, a Russian Orthodox, a Baptist, and a Catholic priest who are Jewish. One of them actually started coming and putting on tefillin and learns with me sometimes. And there are many, many, many Jews in our city who just don't know that they're Jewish. So the $64 million question, how many Jews live in Sumy? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. I have contact with about 300 plus Jewish people who I've documented that I know that they're Jewish. And the estimate is that there's about 1,000 or 1,500 Jews in the city. And my guesstimate is that there might be up to 10,000 Jews in the city. I would not be surprised, just because most of the Jews that come to the shul today, 10 years ago would have told you they are absolutely not Jewish. They're sure they're not Jewish. And it's only today that they know that they are Jewish. So that's how we build our community. One of the bigger issues that we have is that our success is our failure. When we do find that someone who's Jewish and they do start becoming more observant, keeping Shabbos kosher, want to send their kids to a Jewish school, etc., they're pretty much 99% of the time they opt to move to a larger city in Ukraine or to move to Israel. So we usually lose them as of, physically lose them. They're not part of the community anymore. But again, this is our success. So we like to see it as a success, not a failure.
So a few comments about your beautiful bookcases that you have in the background. It definitely looks very nice. Looks very Americanized. So also someone wants to know if your wife misses biltong. I'm guessing that's South Africa.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but thankfully that's something you could also do on your own. You can make yourself.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Another one of the pluses that we have, advantages that we have in a place like this, is that labor is a lot more on the affordable side, I should say, especially handy labor. So like the bookcases you see in the background are actually custom furniture that I would never be able to afford in a place like Arizona. But over here, it's actually very affordable because people are willing to build and do things, and they're actually very talented. Yeah, that
Now,
that's one of the,
what languages do your children speak? And do they also? There's also, that's one question. We'll start with that question first. What language do your children speak?
My children speak 5 languages. They speak. I speak to my children in Yiddish. My wife speaks to them in English. They speak Russian because that's what everybody speaks on the street. They now speak Ukrainian because in our kindergarten and in the schools in general, but for the past 5 years, everything changed to Ukrainian. Ukrainian, by the way, is very similar to Russian, but it's not Russian. And I broke my teeth trying to learn Russian, so Ukrainian is not very easy for me. But my kids have picked it up, so they speak that. And then we have students that come from Israel to help us in our kindergarten and to teach our children, besides for the online school that they learn on computer, and they speak Hebrew. So my kids are fluent in English, Yiddish, Hebrew, Russian, Ukrainian.
That's amazing. Wow. They say the joke that someone that is trilingual, what does that mean? They can speak 3 languages. Someone that's bilingual, what does that mean? They can speak 2 languages. Someone that is, can speak 1 language, what does that mean? What are they called? American. So it's amazing that you have 5 languages. That's awesome. Some people are asking in regards to finding the Jewish people, and you said they kept good records, and that's how they found many of the Jewish people that are there. The question is, do you find Jews through the records, or once you meet someone they're not sure, do you then dig up the records? And what's the reaction when you say that, yes, your grandmother was Jewish and therefore you're Jewish? How do they respond to that?
I don't actually go looking through records to try to find names of Jews. That would be literally searching for a needle in a haystack. But every person that I meet, every single person that I meet on the street, in a taxi, in the store, regardless, and people come up to me all the time because I don't look like everybody else. Some people are surprised to see me somebody like me in a place like this. And anybody I meet, my first question is, do you have any Jewish ancestors? A grandmother, a grandfather, a great-grandmother, anything Jewish in your family. And I would say about 50% of the time, that conversation leads to looking for documents. And I'll encourage them to go to the archives and to dig up documents, and then just goes from there. And then about 20% of the time, they'll actually dig up documents where they'll find out that their grandmother was Jewish. Different reactions. Every person reacts differently. Some people are very surprised and excited. Some people are not surprised and not excited. Have people who don't want to know that they're Jewish, and even though their sister, for example, found documents and uncovered that they're actually Jewish, and the sister is very involved and whatever it is, and they'll deny it till today. We had one woman an elderly woman who actually escaped when the Nazis came to Romney. They lived in Romney. It's 100 kilometers from here, and she actually ran by foot, assumed a different document. She changed her documents, her passport, with somebody on the road, and she literally became a different person. And when I visited her, she showed me pictures of her family when she grew up. This is Chaya, this is Sarah, this is Beryl, and this is me. And I'm not Jewish. So, what do you mean you're not Jewish? So this is your family, and no, I'm not Jewish. I'm Claudia, and I'm not Jewish. And she literally was, she assumed a different name, and she wouldn't accept the fact that she's Jewish because she was so petrified living here during the war. Under Nazi-occupied, Sumy was occupied by the Nazis, and she had to hide her Jewishness, and she just kept it up. So we have all different kinds.
I have one more question. So when I was on your birthday party, you had someone on that was actually living in Israel. He's from your community, now he's living in Israel. So because today we're talking about the Rebbe's impact on people and on communities and the Rebbe's far reach, can you share with us a little bit about how you obviously, as a young man, you obviously met him, he's inspired to live a more dedicated life, it seems like, and now he's living in the land of Israel, which is just everyone's dream. So maybe you can share with us how the Rebbe had an impact on his life.
Okay, so I don't know, I'm assuming that you're speaking about Shaul.
Yeah.
Who was on my birthday call. He actually spoke. There were a few of them, but they didn't speak. Shaul was one of the younger boys. Very interesting story. His grandmother, who is Jewish, actually is very involved in one of the churches here. I wouldn't say a nun, but like something to that effect. And this is because she was saved by a priest during the war. He took her in, and she became part of this church and grew up that way. Her daughter is a communist. And her grandson, who uncovered when he was about 15 years old, he was speaking to his grandmother, heard her story, and he realized that he was Jewish because his grandmother's Jewish. I won't get into the halachic issues of this because it was actually a very interesting story, but he eventually, after a few years of studying with me, he bought his own tefillin. He started putting on tefillin every day, and he became very involved. When he was 19 years old, he joined a program called Masa, where students can go to Israel for a year and study in Israel, and the hope is that they will eventually make Aliyah, which he actually did. When he was about 21, he finally came back for a year, and then he finished university. He made Aliyah, and we kept in contact and still keep in contact till today. I actually flew to Israel to marry him, to do his wedding in Israel. And he today works for a travel agency, which is very involved in the Taglit program, which is like Mayanot, not Mayanot, Birthright, right, like Birthright. Taglit program, and they bring Jewish kids to Israel for a 2-week program or a week program, and he was impacted by the Rebbe a lot. He continues to bring Jewish people into for these trips, and he tries as much as he could to have rabbis or shluchim from Israel or from Ukraine to accompany the trips, and this is one way of how he continues to try to impact people who he has reach for. Baruch Hashem has a child now and raising it from family in Israel.
Amazing.
One of the many.
Well, Rabbi Levitansky, so nice to see you again and nice to hear from you. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Really, just truly inspiring. Unbelievable to hear the dedication, the life you live, and the Rebbe's message and the light that you bring to Sumy Ukraine, illuminating the entire city with holiness, with goodness, with mitzvot. And may God bless you to continue doing what you're doing and with strength. It should be easy to do it financially, emotionally, spiritually, in all areas of your life. And really should be blessed. Your children should have a lot of nachas. Should have nachas from your kids and everyone. L'chaim.
Amen. L'chaim, Mendy. And kol mevarach mizbarach. Those who bless are blessed. You should have a lot of hatzlacha in Arizona. And don't let the heat get to you too much.
Never.
Yeah. And we should always remember that every mitzvah counts, one mitzvah at a time, one person at a time. We will transform the world and bring Mashiach now. This is the mandate which the Rebbe gave us, and no matter where we are in the world, as I said earlier, spirituality has no measure. There's nothing small or big when it comes to a mitzvah, and every little mitzvah that we can add in our life will only make it much better and greater physically and spiritually. L'chaim.
L'chaim.
Amen. L'chaim. L'chaim. Thank you very much, Rabbi Levitansky. It's not every day we get to hear from the gulags in Russia, so thank you very much. Before we hear from our next speaker all the way from China, I would like to ask if at least all of you that can, just turn your screens on, and I want to screenshot the screen so we can get a nice little group picture of ourselves. So just turn your screens on, those of you that can. I'm going to snap it in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. I'll hold up your l'chaim cups if you have. Get a big smile. 3, 2, 1. Say cheese. All right. Beautiful. Awesome. Great to see you guys. You can turn off the screens if you need to now. Thank you so much. Our next speaker, all the way from China, from Yimu, China. He grew up in New York selling bagels. His family started the bagel empire in Crown Heights. And today he finds himself in China. Well, how did a rabbi come all the way from Crown Heights selling bagels to inspiring tens and hundreds of Jews in Yimu, China? Without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our next rabbi today, Rabbi Akiva Schinberger, all the way from Chabad of Yimu. Tell us your story and tell us how the impact of one little mitzvah has changed China and the rest of the world.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
L'chaim. Fabrengen, after all. I just came back from Fabrengen the whole night. I'm actually in Eretz Yisrael now, in Israel. So l'chaim. See, I wasn't expecting you to say that my father sells bagels, but Baruch Hashem. Actually, we went on Shlichus about 2.5 years ago. And our introduction to Shlichus was actually very, very interesting. We came to Shlichus. We landed in Shanghai. Of course, the culture difference is very, 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 I would say, crazy. But
Akiva, you're frozen.
Is that a connection from Sumy Ukraine that we have from Israel? Yeah.
It was right before Rosh Hashanah.
There you are.
And we tried to, I tried to call a few people and everything. And we opened up a restaurant because there's a lot of Jewish businessmen that come to our area, to our city all the time. And so we had a kosher restaurant. And for about 3-4 weeks, it was open, and every single day people come. And Rosh Hashanah, because it's a business city, so most of the Jews are home. So we usually don't have a minyan on Rosh Hashanah. So we're sitting in Rosh Hashanah. We have 3 people in the shul. I look at my wife, and I tell my wife, what are we doing here? Rosh Hashanah, we're sitting down over with no minyan. Like, what are we doing here? I would say about 5 minutes later, I started davening. And I felt like I have a minyan and everything's okay and everything is fine. Just like we're davening in Chabad World Headquarters, and I started davening. I started praying. And during right before Tkiyat Shofar, right before the blowing of the shofar, someone knocks on the door. It's 2 Israelis. They actually live in Yimu. We actually knew them. They came sometimes to the restaurant, but they didn't want to have any connection with us just for the food, So we were, they knock on the door and they tell my wife, could I have a schnitzel and fries? So my wife says, we can't have schnitzel and fries because today's a holiday, but hopefully around 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock, whatever it was, we're going to be able to give you a meal and everything. It's like, no, I'll pay for it. We understood that even though he grew up in Medinat Israel, in an Israeli state, Jewish religion was not his, anything about Judaism. 2 guys, actually. So my wife looks at me and she tells me, now you understand what you're doing here? And of course, I right away told them, you guys are coming here. You guys came here just now, right before Tkiyat Shofar, right before the blowing of the shofar. Please listen to shofar. And he tells me, what's today? She tells me, so I tell her, today's the New Year, today's Rosh Hashanah and everything. And they were like, whoa, we didn't even know that it was Rosh Hashanah today. While I was sending invitations to come to the minyan, and I called them up and I told them to come to the minyan. But of course, they didn't know anything because they didn't really understand what's Rosh Hashanah. Like the Rebbe always said that there's some people some people that know about Judaism, and then there's the 5th son, and on the Passover Seder, doesn't even know about Judaism. And these are the Jews that we have in Eden. People that are very, very, very far from Judaism, and not only very far, some of them don't even know that they're Jews. I'll tell you another interesting story about a mitzvah, about a girl. She's actually a designer. She designs clothing. It's a very, very, very big Jewish company. It's called Karolina Lemke, if you guys heard of it. It's in Israel. It's a very big company. And we're actually pretty close to her. My wife is much closer to her than me, but we're pretty close to her. She comes to my wife's classes and everything. And we're getting close. And of course, I was inviting everybody, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, to come to shul. She gives me a phone call, I would say 2 days before Yom Kippur, and she tells me I'm going to the Philippines for about 2.5 weeks, and I'm not going to be here Yom Kippur. So I said, when are you flying? She said, I'm flying tonight. So I'll be honest with you, I was very upset because, sometimes, you devote yourself so much to someone and you try to help them out, you speak to them about Judaism, and then she calls you and she tells you, I'm going to the Philippines. I don't really care. Basically, I don't really care about Yom Kippur and about the holidays in general. And I'm leaving. So I said, okay, have a good time. I didn't tell her that I'm upset. I didn't tell her anything, but have a good time. She calls me up the next day. It was Erev Yom Kippur, and Erev Yom Kippur we were actually very, very busy. And she calls me up. She tells me, what time is Yom Kippur by me? And for some reason on Chabad.org, it didn't say on this little island that she was on, didn't say what time what time is Yom Kippur. But I don't know what came to my head. I told her, listen, her name is Oriana. I told her, Oriana, listen up. I don't know what you're doing there, but you should know one thing. You're a shliach of the Rebbe there. I'm sure there's other Jews over there, and you have to go around and you have to ask people, please to come Yom Kippur. And I don't know what you're doing there. You belong with us in Shul. But please come. Please go and go on the beach. It's a beach city. Go on the beach, try to find out as many Jews and pray together. It's like you're telling me I'm a shliach of the Rebbe, a shliach of Hashem, that I'm there. I don't know. I'm not religious. I'm just a simple Jew that sometimes even forgets that I'm Jewish. So of course, I don't know what I don't know what I was thinking, but I started telling her how much she's a shliach, and I was explaining her the whole thing. Okay. I'll be honest with you, Yom Kippur happened, I forgot about the whole story. Sukkot is actually very interesting in Yimu, because our Chabad house is in a market city, which is basically, it's a business city that there's no backyards, everything is buildings. Especially where our Chabad house is in the center of town. So in order to have a sukkah, so we have to rent a truck and park the truck in the parking lot and put a sukkah on top of it. And because we have, I would say, about 40 or 50 people on Sukkot, so we have to rent a massive truck. So we rent the truck, and what usually it is, the problem is because you rent the truck, the parents don't like to bring their kids. So a lot of times we don't see during Sukkot most of the families, but Simchas Torah, we invite everyone, and everybody comes, of course, to say L'chaim, and we have, I would say, this past year we had about 70 people. So we're sitting. So I'm right before the first holiday. On the second days of the holiday on Sukkot, this girl Oriane calls me up and she says, "I just landed in Yimu. I want to come tonight for the meal." So I told her I invited the whole community to come tomorrow. She says, it's like no, I have to come. Okay, no problem. Of course, you're invited. She comes. And you see that she's all depressed, she's all upset, she's all, something's bothering her. So I look at her and, Sukkot, we say L'chaim, and I ask her, Ariane, what's the story? She says, you don't understand, I had the worst time of my life. It was wasn't a nice weather, it was bad, it wasn't a nice city, everything was terrible. So I'm like, so what happened? It's like, well, one thing I could tell you, on Yom Kippur, we had 12 people in my house that we prayed together. So I looked at her and I told her, I don't know exactly. You don't know, now even you don't know what you did there, but I do know what you did there. You went and to get a lot of Jews, 12 Jews, to pray on Yom Kippur together. But sometimes we think, and I'll continue on the story. So my wife right away, and she told my wife that on Yom Kippur, she took upon herself an achlata to do a mitzvah. What is the mitzvah? She wasn't sure. So she asked my wife, what should be the mitzvah? So my wife told her, Shabbos candles. She says, of course, I'm going to do Shabbos candles. So my wife, like they say in Yiddish, she's very chutzpahdik, and she told her, but we said you're a shliach of the Rebbe, right? So we want you every single week that today the company, they work into Shabbos. They work into 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. So my wife told her, you're going to light candles every Shabbos in the office, no problem. But I want you to get all the Jews together to light candles every week. And Baruch Hashem, until the Corona happened, for about 4 months, they lit Shabbos candles every single week because of this story. Sometimes we think that we're nothing special. We're just simple Jews that try to be Jewish or try to be religious sometimes. Sometimes we try to run away from religion, but we have to remember that we are Jewish, and whatever we could make this world into a better place and to be and try to help another Jew and try to help another Jew to do another mitzvah, to do another deed. It's the most important thing, and everybody has the power to do it. This is just 2 simple stories that actually happened this past year. That to see how much every single mitzvah counts. Not only it counts, it can help another Jew very, very, very long way. Tell you a few interesting stories about Yimu, about our city. In our city, because it's a cheap city. It's basically the whole AliExpress. Have you guys heard of it? Is all from our city because we have a market of about 170,000 stores in about 3-mile radius, and it's buildings, stores, boots. It's a very, 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 very big place. Automatically, because it's so cheap, there's a lot of people from African countries and Arabic countries and etc. I was actually having an argument
before you continue,
right after the holidays with a few Israelis. It was also a few Americans. They were sitting in my Chabadas, and they were telling me that you can't walk around with a kippah and tzitzit in the street because there's so many Arabs. But the way I know China is a very, very safe place. Because it's a very strong government, and everybody's scared to do anything. Like there's no stealing in China. What I mean is, they could be that they're going to cheat you in the product. If the product is a good product or a bad product or a cheaper product, but they're never going to take money from you. They're never going to take because the law in China is very, 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 very hard on people that steal. And the same thing is with hatred. One second. You see me now?
Oh, it's a bad connection. I think you need to move like to a better connection.
רוי, תביא את הטלפון שלך. תדע שלי על הפנים.
While Rabbi Schinberger gets his video on, for Rabbi Levitansky in Sumy, he got up, I don't know if you noticed, right now it's 6:30 in the morning over there. So he started already 5:30 in the morning just to talk to us. It's really, and we're so grateful. But some of you have said me privately, you want to hear the story about the people, the Jews that he met who were priests, and the minister. And so when Rabbi Schinberger is done, we're going to ask Rabbi Levitansky to share a little bit of that. Is he on? Yeah, he's on. Okay.
He's on, but we don't see him. Akiva, do you have your video on? You're muted.
Okay.
Akiva, you're muted.
So should we? Let's go to Rabbi Levitansky and then we'll come back to Akiva. Is that good? Rabbi Tzvi.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So if you can please share with us the story of how you met the priest or what their story is, how they came there.
Is now better?
Oh, Rabbi Schinberger is back on. Okay, perfect. Yeah, much better.
Okay, give me a second. Sorry. Where was I holding? I don't even know where was I holding. Anybody know?
Yeah, you in the marketplace, a busy marketplace. You dressed like a chassid in the marketplace.
So we're having an argument with a few Jews, and they were all telling me that you can't walk around because it's a little bit dangerous. And I was saying, I'm not scared to walk around, and I'm a proud Jew. And we had I wouldn't say an argument, we'd say it's more of a discussion. And that time, my wife went to Eretz Yisrael to give birth. So I was waiting for my wife to get into to get closer to her due date. And I was still in China. So I was bored. And the guys told me, come with us to the market. It's actually called the night market. It's at night. It's we're talking about 9, 10 o'clock at night. It's a market of all junk stuff and things like that. And we went to the market together, and we started walking around. And then we went to the market, and we started walking around in the street. And an Arab guy comes over to me and tells me, I'm in Yimu for about 15 years, and this is the first time I see a Jew that looks like a Jew, and he said it in Ivrit, and he said it in a real Arabic accent. And he says, this is the first time I see a proud Jew. And then he looks to all the Israelis and Americans that are walking around with caps, and no one sees that they're really Jewish. At least that's what they thought. He says, you see, this guy thinks he's not Jewish. This guy thinks he's not Jewish. And that was like the story that I will never forget. To understand that, we sometimes we try to hide ourselves. We think that, I'm not going to tell him that I'm Jewish. Maybe I'm going to make a better business deal, or I'm going to try to hide it. Why put myself in the front picture? But then we have to be proud of who we are. We have to understand that we are Jewish, and not only that we are Jewish, that we are proud that we're Jewish. It's not something that it's nice for the holidays. It's something that we have it in our essence, in our belief that on a daily basis, that when we're walking down the streets, we know that we're Jewish and we're proud that we're Jewish. I'll tell you a few miracles which I call them miracles. Last year, Shavuot, like Tzvi said that my father has a bagel shop. So I called my father, and I told my father, we need some milchiks, we need some cheese and cream cheese, and we want to make blinches, so we need all this stuff. So I sent him my credit card. I think I spent about $1,000 because everything you have to do in advance in China. We don't have anything that we could get tomorrow. We can't just go to the supermarket and just buy kosher food. So I'm talking about even Hanukkah time. And I told him there's a Syrian Jew that's coming, fill up a suitcase full of cheese and whatever it is, yogurts and everything, and he'll bring it to me. My father fills up a full suitcase. He made sure it's exactly 50 pounds. He gave it to the Jew. To my bad luck, the guy comes to the airport, and they took away all of his cheese and everything. And slowly by slow, we're getting closer to. It wasn't Hanukkah time. I'm making a mistake. It was after Pesach. It was right after Pesach. I'm making a. And slowly by slowly, we're getting closer to Shavuot, and cheese. I'm asking this guy, he gave me a small little bag, and this guy gave me a small little bag, and of course, we want to make a nice Shavuot gathering. About 4 days before, and I was also upset about the money. I'll be honest with you, it was pretty expensive to pay and lose everything. And 4 days, no, it wasn't 4 days. It was a week and a half before Shavuot. A guy from Eretz Yisrael is actually a Haredi Jew, very, very nice man, a businessman. He calls me up. He tells me, Rabbi, listen, do you need anything from Eretz Yisrael? So I tell him, of course I need cheese. So he says, listen, no problem, but I'm not coming to Yimu. So if you want me to bring a suitcase, I can bring a suitcase or 2 suitcases, whatever you want, but you'll have to come to the airport to pick it up. Now, I'll tell you the way. Yimu is about 4 hours from Shanghai. Shanghai is where the airport is. So we have to drive to Shanghai to pick up the suitcases and then come back. So I told him, no problem, bring the suitcases. Again, to my bad luck, he had a stopover in Moscow, and he missed the flight from Moscow to Shanghai. And he had to get to China very, very fast. So he just left the suitcases in Moscow. I wouldn't say left, he just left it on the plane to go continue Moscow, and he bought a new ticket, and he flew to Beijing. So I'm trying to call him, what's the story with the suitcases? What's this? It's like, I don't know. I'm busy, and hopefully we'll get it. and he's actually a very nice guy, and it wasn't trying to be mean or something. He was just so busy because he wanted to get back before Shavuot home. And cheese when it's on the road for even a day, you have to make sure that it's still fresh and it's not spoiled. So this we're talking about, I would say, I think Tuesday. Tuesday he flew. Wednesday he came. Thursday night, we're talking about already 2 days after he left Eretz Yisrael. Thursday night, he just walks into my Chavaras. His name is Yoina. So I ask Yoina, what are you doing? What are you doing here? So you don't understand. We flew to Beijing, and then my business partner took me to here. He took me to Hansa, which is a city where Alibaba is. And then they brought me here. I don't know. And I asked him where the suitcase is. And he didn't really know. A few minutes later, I get 2 suitcases in the Chavaras. They're both frozen to the core. Frozen. I would say you couldn't pick up the handle because it was ice. And I asked Jenna, what are these suitcases doing here? We're still not sure exactly how they stayed frozen. But I be honest with you, I wasn't sure if I could still eat it. It could be it became frozen, it became defrosted, it became frozen again. So I asked who was ready to eat the cheese and the yogurts to see if it's fresh or not. And of course, a lot of Israelis that didn't eat cheese and yogurts in a while, everybody jumped on it. They ate it before Shavuot. Baruch Hashem, we had fresh cheese and yogurts and everything before Shavuot. And I missed the part. My wife was a little bit upset at the whole thing. We're trying so hard to bring cheese, and so I told her, listen, we're the Rebbe shluchim, and if the Rebbe is going to want to help us, we're going to get it here. And she tells me, you're right. And within a few days, we had cheese with my sister-in-law came from Israel, especially for Shavuot. She says she doesn't have that much cheese in Israel as much as we had then. We had 3 suitcases full. It wasn't 2 suitcases, with 3 suitcases full of cheese. And Yoina knows how to buy, so he went to the supermarket and bought, I would say, about $2,000 worth of stuff. And Baruch Hashem, we had our Shavuot. Sometimes, again, we think we're planning. We think we're planning the world. I'm opening up a business, and I'm going to be successful, and everything is going to be good. Or I have my kids, and my kids are going to become big doctors, or whatever the guy thinks. And then the Corona comes and tells us, you don't know exactly what's going to happen, and not only you don't know what's exactly you could plan from today till tomorrow, but God is the one that controls the world, and not only God, and now we see it that's the reality, and we understand it. I could say another few stories, but I heard actually an interesting story that's not so much to do with China, but
I have one more story.
One more story. So I'll say, if one more story, I'll say a Chinese story. There was a Jew. He still lives in Yimu. Very nice guy. He's married to a non-Jew, and he always says he's not an atheist. He believes in God, but he doesn't believe in the Jewish religion, and he doesn't believe in at least that's what he says. And of course, I tell him that every Jew believes in Jewish religion. We have to uncover it, and he's very nice. We talk actually on a daily basis. And I come to his office every. I'm actually mixing up 2 stories. Let me start from the beginning. This guy is actually married to a Jewish lady. His name is Emmanuel. He actually works in an office. Very, very nice guy. He actually grew up in a kibbutz in Israel. What a kibbutz is the kibbutz, not today as much, but it used to be that in a kibbutz they didn't know anything about Torah and mitzvot. Nothing. I didn't know how bad it was until I came to China and I saw these Israeli Jews that really don't know anything about Torah and mitzvot. I come to him every Friday. I go with my whole family. We go to his office. Not only to his office, he has an office. He has about 25 Israelis that work in his office. And I tell him, Emmanuel, it's like a famous joke between me and him. Do you want to put on film? And every week, he tells me no. And then, of course, we respect each other that he doesn't want to. I'm not going to force him, and he respects me. He always come, and we always talk, and it's very nice every week. But again, it's the daily question. And for me, I'll be honest with you, it really, really bothered me. what really bothered me? It really bothered me that, you try to be mashpians, and you try to explain and to make someone to do one mitzvah, and if sometimes the Rebbe says that it's a Hebrew phrase, says that if it comes really out of your heart, it's going to go straight into the other guy's heart. If you really care and you're going to talk to the guy and you're going to try to explain him and try to help him to get closer to Judaism, it's going to go to his heart. And I always told my wife, maybe it's my problem, the reason why he doesn't want to put on film. And my wife told me that, listen, it's layers and layers, and slowly by slowly. We're talking about a year and a half of every single week going to him, and every single week he tells me the same thing. This past Simchas Torah, I invited him for Simchas Torah, and of course, he officially doesn't believe in anything. He respects, but he doesn't believe. And he tells me, and I of course I start saying L'chaim, and we start saying that Aresa, and I see that Emmanuel he has a 4-year-old son, and he starts explaining his son, what are we doing? And he starts explaining what's Ata Aresa. Ata Aresa is that now we're going to dance with the Torah, and the Torah, it says that in the Chassidut that why is Simchas Torah such a happy day? That everybody dances with their feet. Some rabbis are big rabbis and they're very big scholars, and they're very smart, and so he's a little bit higher in the Torah. He understands Torah more. Then there's a simple Jew that doesn't understand as much. But dance with the Torah, everybody dances with the Torah. And this is what Emmanuel is explaining his little son. And of course, when we start saying Ataresi, he's saying with us. And I started saying L'chaim. So, want to sit on me? I was giving a class. And we start saying Ataresa. And we start saying a class. And Ataresa was very, very... Sorry, 1 second. Just make 1 second. And we start saying Ata Aresa. And he's saying right after me, and he's starting explaining his son, and everything is good. And I got a little bit drunk, I'll be honest. And I started saying L'chaim. And I come over to Emmanuel towards the end of the night. And I tell him, Emmanuel, everything is nice. I'm so happy that you're explaining your son, but what? I didn't tell you this. So he tells me, you should know, he tells me in Ivrit, and I'll explain it in English. He says, Ata choshev she'ata lo meshageh oti, ata matrif oti. You think you're making me crazy? You're making me nuts. And every single week you come to me, and every single week I tell myself, next week I'm going to put on tefillin, but my Yetzer Hara gets involved every single week. But you should know that every single week, and now this is the first time that a few weeks ago I was speaking to my wife, and I told my wife that we have to start educating our son to know about Judaism, even though we weren't educated, but at least our son should know about Judaism. And he started educating. He started explaining his son all these little things, and he started looking on the internet. He started learning a lot of Jewish classes to explain his son what is Judaism. So sometimes we think, at least myself, sometimes you think we're not really doing the right thing, or it's not working out, or we have to know that when we're trying to help another Jew, or we're trying to do a good deed, it might take a long time to see fruits and to see what's going to happen. But the fact is, when you're doing something good, it's a good thing. And B'ezrat Hashem, that hopefully by the next Gimel Tammuz, we'll coming with Mashiach, and we wouldn't have to have these stories, but we all be in Jerusalem with Mashiach Tzidkenu.
Amen.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Schinberger.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Thank you very much. We were going to show a video, but the time is running late, and some have asked about Rabbi Levitansky to share with us a story. So I'll ask Rabbi Levitansky to share a story, and then we will close out this meeting. I want to thank everyone for joining us. So Rabbi Schinberger, thank you very much for joining us. Rabbi Levitansky, if you can please share the story with for a few minutes, a little bit about the Jewish people that you met that have seemingly have interesting backgrounds.
Okay, we'll try. I had a chance to read the comments over here also, so I'll try to get everything in. First of all, what were reactions to people people seeing me when we came and up until today? And the $1 million question that nobody asked: what about anti-Semitism? I have to say, in a nutshell, I'm here almost 16 years. Baruch Hashem, thank God we haven't had any incidents People don't even call me any names. And on the contrary, walking in the street from my home to the shul every day, and especially on Shabbos, which is a market day, I walk through the market packed with people, and people will approach me and say, Father, please bless me. People think that it's a very religious city. It's smaller and very, very, very religious. So yeah, that people are surprised to see me when they actually know who I am, that I'm Jewish, but we don't get any negative reaction, Baruch Hashem. When we were here already 5 years, one of the people who I work with in the community, he's a lawyer, and he told me that because you're here 5 years, you have the right to apply for residency. Up until then, we had to renew our visa every three months, and it was very difficult. It was a whole process every 3 months to renew our visa for the whole family. And residency makes life a lot easier. So he says, why don't you apply for residency? The law is that the nachalnik, and you're gonna have to help me here. My English is losing.
Manager.
The official in charge of immigration, so to say, in our county is has the. It's at his discretion, basically. If he decides to give you residency, then then you'll get residency, and if he decides not to, then it's his choice. So he says, we'll go through the governor's office, because you're the rabbi in town and you have connections. We'll go through the governor's office. We'll ask for residency, and hopefully you'll get residency. So we went through the whole process. To make a long story short, I was denied. Within the process of the application, I had to fill in all the information of why I'm here and what I'm doing here and why I need residency, etc. So they called me into the office, and the head of immigration, which was a woman, she says, we denied your application and we're not going to give you residency. And technically, I'm not obligated to explain the reason why we denied the application, but because you applied through the governor's office, I feel like I want to explain myself so that you should know where I'm coming from. So I said, okay. And she says, I read through your whole application. It's very interesting, but it just doesn't make any sense. Nobody comes from Los Angeles to live in Sumy, Ukraine. Just doesn't happen. And if you come from Los Angeles to live in Sumy, Ukraine, it's usually because you have some kind of business here, or you're something. You don't move with your family to Sumy, Ukraine from Los Angeles just like that. So I came to the conclusion that there could be only two reasons why you moved from Los Angeles to Sumy, Ukraine. The one is that you're a spy. You're working in espionage for either for America or Russia or whatever. Or you're just totally off the rock. You're crazy. And we don't need spies, and we don't need mishagoyim. We don't need crazies in Sumy, so therefore I'm denying your application. That was another eye-opener for me. How did people react to me coming here? The story with the priest, I'll try to keep it short. It was actually a hashgacha pratis, the first one anyway, that I found. They're all hashgacha pratis, all divine providence. But the governor once a year makes a meeting for all religious leaders. And they discuss all different things that have to do with religion within the community, within the city, the county. It's all in Ukrainian. It's not something that I appreciate going to. And 1 year, it was on Erev Shabbos in the winter. It was just before Shabbos comes in the winter at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And the meeting was called for 1 o'clock. And I was not excited about going. And the head of our community was pushing me to go, and he said, no, you have to be there, and you're the only one to represent the Jewish community. In the end, I reluctantly went, knowing that I would have to rush home before Shabbos. Hopefully, I wouldn't have to, walk on Shabbos. So at the meeting, I was sitting on edge, trying, waiting for it to be over. They were discussing actually a curriculum in the schools, which would be based on morals and ethics from the Bible. And when it was my turn, I spoke about separation of church and state, and that we shouldn't teach just one religion in a school, and that there are many Jewish children in the school that don't know that they're Jewish. And by teaching them Christian morals and ethics based on the Bible, you're actually, you're violating their rights to know about Judaism and to live their life as Jews, etc. I asked them if they could make a moment of silence instead, where every parent can tell their children what to learn, etc. But in the course of what I said was that many Jews don't know that they're Jews because their great-grandmother was Jewish, and that means that they are Jewish, but they might not know that they're Jewish. The meeting was over, about 15-20 minutes to candle lighting, and I was the first out of the room, and I'm running down the stairs, and as I'm going down the stairs, the priest is running after me. And he said, Rabbi, So I stopped for a minute, and he's like, I need to speak to you. I need to discuss something. So I'm like, okay, fine, but I got to get home for Shabbos, and I'm not going to discuss some kind of religious debates here. He's like, no. I have a personal question I want to ask you. Can you give me a few minutes? So I said, okay, fine, a few minutes. So he says, well, when you spoke, you said that if your grandmother is Jewish, then you're Jewish. And it so happens to be that my parents wanted to immigrate to Israel. They wanted to live in the Holy Land. And one of the ways to do this is if you find in the archives that you have Jewish heritage, then you can make Aliyah to Israel. So my mother said that she has Jewish heritage, and we went to the archives and we found documents of her parents. They were both Jewish, and they made Aliyah. They went to Israel. And now you're telling me that if my grandmother was Jewish, my great-grandmother was Jewish, means my mother's Jewish, which means that I'm Jewish. I said, yes, if that's the case, then that means that you're Jewish. So he says, but how can I be Jewish if I'm a priest? And you have to understand, I don't know if many of you know what an Russian Orthodox priest look like, and why people in the street might think that I'm a priest, but they actually dress quite similar, with some additions or whatever it is. But I mean, this man looks like the priest coming out of my children's storybooks from Sefer HaZichronos, from memoirs of the previous Levitansky Rebbe. And he's telling me that his grandmother is Jewish and his mother is Jewish. So how could it be? It's impossible. How can I be Jewish if I'm a priest? I said, you have a very good question, and it's Erev Shabbos right now, and I don't have time right now to answer that question. But let's get together after Shabbos, and we will discuss this paradox. And we actually got together afterwards, and he, till today, keeps contact with me. Every now and then he'll come by. He takes off his garb for things like Sukkot or Hanukkah. He'll show up to join us, and that was one of my Divine Providence stories here.
Amazing. Rabbi, thank you very much. I would like to thank Rabbi Tzvi, and I'd like to conclude this evening. It's been an honor to spend time with you. Now, being that today, as you mentioned, is the 3rd of Tammuz, the Rebbe's yard site, it is appropriate to conclude with making a resolution. Each one of us should make a personal resolution to ensure that tomorrow will be different than it was today, and the day after different than the day before. And we have to think about something that we can do to improve our daily life, in particular as it relates to our connection to God. Maybe taking on a new mitzvah or something that we've been doing. Maybe if we've been saying a prayer, we can say the prayer with a little more intentions. If we have not been saying the prayer, we can add a prayer. Whatever it is that we can do, we should try to add something in our life to make it more impactful, make it more meaningful. And this will surely usher in the coming of Mashiach, which is something that we pray for every single day. And this is the ultimate. And this is why we live in Arizona. Rabbi Levitansky lives in Sumy, and Rabbi Schinberger lives in Wuhan, China, is to bring godliness to the world. And the ultimate revelation of godliness will be with the coming of Mashiach. May it be right now. Amen. Thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone. L'chaim. Good night.
Can I wait before everyone goes?
Oh, yes, please, Rabbi Tzvi. Sorry. Yes.
This is just the first in a series of events at Chabad Center Academy. Our next event will be a lovely musical evening. We'll be hearing songs by me and explanations by our very own Rabbi Deitch. A beautiful musical evening. So mark down your calendars. July 7th, 7:30 p.m. Again, July 7th at 7:30 p.m. We'll have a flyer and a Facebook event out shortly. Please join us for a musical evening on July 7th at 7:30 p.m.